Hi, this is Anthony Parent, and thank you for joining us in our last section of our 2020 IRSMedic Form 5471 guide. We're answering some of the most common questions people ask, and in this video, we're going to be answering questions people have into categories, schedules, and what to expect in the way of fees. Joining me is Robert Hanson, the head of our International Tax Department. Thank you so much for joining us today, Robert.
Thanks for having me.
All right, so our first question. How do I know what category I am for Form 5471?
Speak to us. I mean, because it's not easy to give like a 2-second answer on that. But basically, if you know that you have directly or indirectly or constructively greater than 50% of the foreign entity, then you're a category 4 and or 5. And if you have had a change in the percentage of ownership of a company, foreign company, then you could be a category 2 or 3 filer. Category 1 filer as well for someone who might be a category 4 and 5. Category 1 is a relatively new category section used after the transition tax of 2017.
Well, I think you actually did a pretty good job. That was actually the best description I've heard of categories condensed. Now, that's a general rule. There's general rules, and that's the best description I've heard of it to sort of generally where people will fit in. And the next question, I think it's just a follow-up. What category of filer am I for IRS Form 5471? So well, generally it's the same thing. One is if you have a transition tax, and then 2 or 3 if you're a director, 4 and 5 if there's a change or you have 50% or more in the aggregate. And our next question is category 1 on Form 5471 repealed for 2018?
No, it's my understanding that category 1 is going to be ongoing.
Next question is, do I need Form 5471 Schedule H? What's Schedule H?
Schedule H is the schedule where you're going to show what your earnings and profits are for the year. And you're only going to need it if you're a category 4 or 5 filer, I believe. But check the category, see which ones require that schedule, and then fill it out if you need it.
All right. Now let's move on to schedules. When was Form 5471 Schedule J introduced?
Schedule J has been around for a while. As long as we've been doing the form for a bunch of years at this point, Schedule J has been around. Schedule P is the new Schedule P is the new one, I believe.
Does Schedule O create a foreign corporation Schedule E? Do you understand what that question could be, what they're trying to get to?
Does Schedule O create a
foreign corporation Schedule E? Not sure what.
I'm not sure. I'm not. So as far as I understand, no. Schedule O is an attachment with 2 different sections needed for when you're a category 2 and or 3 filer. And that's the schedule that kind of lays out kind of who's doing the transferring of the ownership of the business, how much of it, what was the consideration for it, and things like that.
Oh, are there state Form 5471s for New York, California Franchise Tax Board? We could give a trick question and say Florida, right? That's a trick question. Because there's no income tax Florida state, or no personal income tax Florida. But are there any state forms for this, Robert? You know of any?
I'm not aware.
We deal with New York and a lot. Right. I mean, a lot of our clients in New York and California.
I don't know of. I'm not aware of any particular actual information reporting forms at the state level. Some of the issues in the recent years has been whether states will be taxing guilty inclusion amounts. Actually, that's where your states are going to kind of come in to see, because some states start with, give us what your gross income was on your 1040 and then start from there. Well, if you have a guilty inclusion amount, that would be part of what your gross income was, your adjusted gross income on the 1040.
And I think here we get to a rather large absurdity. Let's say you moved to New York State in 2018, and but prior to that you lived in Florida. And when you started this corporation so many years ago, you were in Florida. But now you have an issue where you're showing this huge buildup of B&P, get hit with a tax based on that, and now a state of which you had no connection to is taxing you on earnings before you were subject to the jurisdiction of that state. I mean, right? Was that what's going on? don't move to New York?
States are pretty aggressive when it comes to these things. Some states have said they won't tax guilty stuff. Some states said they will tax guilty stuff. There may be some. You have to look to see what your states are going to do, or get a rough idea of what they're going to do, and there may be some planning opportunities there to kind of keep those bad results from coming about.
Is net income on Form 5471 Schedule C cash flow?
Schedule C cash flow? No,
Yeah.
no, I wouldn't think so.
That's cash flow.
I mean, Schedule C is going to be for your situations where there's a disregarded entity or just your own sole proprietorship. If you've got a 5471, you've got a foreign entity there. So I don't really see those two forms interacting that much. If you, as we've mentioned previously, if you check the box and you have, let's say, an LLC abroad, and you're able to treat it as a disregarded entity, then you file a separate form, and then you would potentially have Schedule C income at that point.
What business activity is a software company for 5471? We have a lot of clients who have software companies.
Right.
I don't know the number.
Yeah.
It's on the form.
I don't know the number off the top of my head. They do have they have dozens of different section numbers.
And I would say this would be a situation where if you put the wrong business activity in there, that would not rise to a penalty. Now, it's not enough.
Probably not. And even then, it's not like you're going to do an IT company and then intentionally put down like manufacturing, a mining activity. If it's IT company version 1 versus version 2, and it should have been 1, but you put 2, I've never seen this come up when we've had anyone look at the 5471 forms. From other firms, kind of informally, I've heard other firms say things such as, we don't touch a 5471 for less than $15,000. That's in part because, think about this. This is almost a separate corporate return being attached to your personal return. Now, it depends, right? If you've got a dormant corporation, then yeah, I don't think 15 grand is gonna be what the overall bill is for that. But if you've got an active business out there that's doing manufacturing and trading, and you've got a bunch of different issues, especially if your books are not in U.S. GAAP standard and they have to be converted to it, this form can get pretty expensive. On the old instructions, I think they took it off, but I think they still apply.
Yeah. On
the old instructions, the IRS itself estimated just for not for the bookkeeping, not for learning about the form, not for getting all the stuff prepared for it, the straight preparation of the form, they estimated over 24 hours of time to prepare the form, let alone another 40 hours to do the bookkeeping for the form. So these can be pretty time and labor intensive, which leads to the size of the bill. And also, I think you want to put the time into this, because if it is missing, but if it's substantially incomplete, wrong, really, have a materially wrong thing in it, it's going to be considered unfiled, and you could be looking at penalties.
Yeah, and you're better off filing nothing than the wrong thing. That's just been my opinion on that. I would say this, that the 15 grand number I've heard thrown around, and that's just not true. Yes, there are some, but some are much, much easier than that. And I would just say this, but right. I mean, you see 15. I mean, I'm sure there's people watching this like, they don't mean $15,000 USD, do they? I mean, they're talking about no, we do.
Right.
And really, a lot of the large firms, they don't care because they have enough work to do. So they're looking, if you're not willing to pay this, go somewhere else. They're fine. And actually, a lot of them, they kind of want to get rid of they only want to have large corporations do it. They don't want the small people. And the reason why is, too, they don't have the staff that can do these good enough where they feel like these large firms say, well, there's too much penalty exposure for us. We don't want to do it. So it's really hard. I mean, that's what we've noticed. It's really hard look, if you're a large corporation, you're not going to have any problems. You're already set. You're not worried. It's that when you're an individual, on your own, or maybe with a group of people, that's where it gets a little bit challenging to find somebody who can do these good in a cost-effective way. Dormant 5471s, if we're doing someone's return, it's already in the system. It's really a nominal. It's really, you wouldn't notice much difference to your fee, but then you could have a 5471 that would be more than you got made in your first job in a year. That really could be. They go to the treatment. And the reason why is that when this all was passed back, when really it was initiated in 1960, Congress looked at people overseas as the only reason someone would go overseas is because they're rich and they're trying to hide money. And that is the exact premise how the income tax was designed. So anytime there's international, it gets more complicated. The stakes get raised because the penalties are so much higher and really sting. And that's what you see. It's so hard to find people to do this. But that also means it's hard to find people at the IRS who knows how to do this, which could be a good thing or a bad thing, I guess.
Right.
It could be a bad thing because we see crazy things that happen. We see crazy assessments. It's a good thing because we could fix them, but then it's a bad thing because a lot of people don't know we can fix a lot of the dumb things out there. So that's where I would leave it at. So I think this concludes our 5071 series for 2020. Again, leave your questions below. We're going to answer everyone that comes. So, and again, I hope you realize by watching this, there's really no stupid questions because you are asking questions based on common sense, and we have a tax code that is certainly not based on common sense. Therefore, it's impossible to ask a stupid question, I would say. This is Anthony, parent for Robert Hanson. Thank you for joining us on IRSMedic, and please be sure to subscribe and give this series a thumbs up if you want to see more content like it. Again, thanks for watching.